Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here. Welcome to the best gaming, tech, emulation, and open source news channel on YouTube. Let's get started. Alright, we'll kick things off talking about Nintendo Switch emulation on PC with Ryujinx, and Ryujinx just released their progress report. I'll drop a link to it in the description below, and I do recommend checking it out. We're just going over it at a high level. There were some improvements to OpenGL that fixed some games that were rendering upside down, and it looks like some shadows and lighting were also fixed. Jurassic World Evolution Complete Edition saw some improvements for emulation, and you can now see trees. And speaking about trees, look at the improvement here for Red Dead Redemption. For AMD GPUs, there were some fixes here that cleaned up a lot of visual bugs. For example here, this is Monster Hunter Rise, and this is before, and you can see some black squares on the character, and here's after. There were some performance improvements for macOS users. This is before and after, and we can see here Pokemon Legends Arceus before was running at 42 frames per second on an Apple M2. And after at 61 frames per second, a pretty big increase. On top of that, there were a whole bunch of bug fixes, and Ryujinx implemented an experimental texture replacement support. If you wanted to check that out, I'll drop a link to it in the description below. I'm a big fan of Ryujinx. I think it's an amazing Nintendo Switch emulator, and they do have some great stuff planned in the future. Feel free to check it out. Moving on, and we're talking about Nintendo 3DS emulation with Citra, and we talked about this one in the last video, but we've got some more information. Yes, Vulkan for Citra is here. It's been merged with the latest nightly build. Now for Citra on Android, especially if you've got a Mali GPU, you're going to want to pick up the latest nightly build and switch it over to Vulkan. They say here, Mali's vastly better Vulkan drivers allow for better and smoother gameplay when using Citra's Vulkan backend. You can now easily go beyond 100% emulation speed on most, if not all games. And to switch over to Vulkan is simple and straightforward. Go into your settings, then click Graphics, then click Graphics API, and then click Vulkan, and you're good to go. Now there are a few things worth pointing out, what not to expect with Vulkan. And they say here, do not expect Vulkan to fix old emulation bugs that are not related to graphics or rendering. Do not expect Vulkan to render games correctly that OpenGL backend does not render correctly. Do not expect Vulkan to be an improvement over OpenGL in every aspect on every device. Although Vulkan has been implemented, there's still a ways to go here. They say Vulkan does not have full feature parity with OpenGL. Recording your gameplay using video dumping is not yet implemented. And this is a big one. Texture filtering and post-processing shaders are not yet implemented. And speaking about 3DS emulation, next up we're still talking about 3DS emulation, and this time with Panda 3DS. And Panda 3DS just had its 1-year update. Panda 3DS is 100% free. It's open source, it's available on GitHub, and I'll drop a link to it in the description below. With this 1-year update, we've got a whole bunch of improvements and some brand new features. They added in SD card support, they added in CRO support, preliminary amiibo work, and a whole bunch of bug fixes and more. Panda 3DS is currently available for Windows, Mac, and Linux, and they have a whole bunch of improvements on the horizon, including working on the GUI. This is something to pay attention to. Next up, we're talking about Steam, and Wizardry Proving Grounds of the Mad Overlord is now available in early access. This is a full 3D remake of the game thanks to Digital Eclipse. And speaking about Steam, next up we're quickly talking about The Lies of P. And this game is set to release in a couple days now, and they just implemented Denuvo. But on a positive note here, it is listed as playable on the Steam Deck. And interestingly enough, Mortal Kombat 1 also has Denuvo and is also listed as playable on the Steam Deck. And speaking about Denuvo, next up we're quickly talking about Payday 3. And Payday 3 tweeted out, "We want to inform you that Denuvo is no longer in Payday 3. That's a big win for this game. But moving on, and we're talking about the Steam Deck, and Steam Deck OS 3.5 preview has just released, and it includes some pretty amazing changes. So firstly, the default color rendering for Steam Deck has been adjusted to emulate the sRGB color gamut, resulting in a slightly warmer and more vibrant color appearance. HDR can now be enabled in display settings if supported by the external display. VRR can now be enabled in display settings if supported by the USB-C adapter. and they've improved latency in certain situations where the application renders slower than the display's refresh rate. On top of that, they've updated graphics drivers with many performance and functionality improvements, including performance improvements for Starfield. They've improved Bluetooth connection stability, especially with multiple controllers. They've slightly improved sleep resume speed, and external storage devices are now auto-mounted when connected to the Steam Deck. There's also a whole bunch of bug fixes and minor tweaks, and when this gets pushed to the mainline build after graduating from preview, it's going to be a massive update to the Steam Deck. Next up, we're quickly talking about Baldurs Gate 3, and if you've got a Mac, you might be excited for September 21st when patch 3 is coming with full support for Mac. Next up, we're talking about Unity, and apparently Unity had to close a bunch of offices due to a death threat. Interestingly here, according to Polygon, the San Francisco police investigated this one, and here is their response. An employee made a threat towards his employer using social media. Now, it's absolutely no secret that a lot of game developers and a lot of gamers are not happy with Unity right now, and based on this recent information, it looks like employees might also not be happy with Unity. And it makes me wonder, is this the beginning of the end for the company? Are things starting to unravel? But moving on, and next up, we're talking about PlayStation 2 emulation with PCSX2. So it appears the PCSX2 team is looking for a bit of help. They say the next release of PCSX2 is looming ever closer, and we're still looking for translations. If you think you can help, please join the crowd in and lend your skills. So if you've got the ability and you're willing to help, I'll drop a link to the crowd in the description below. But they say here, be careful with machine translations. Don't use the machine translations examples if it can be helped. If you are found to just be using machine translations, you will be removed. Next up, we're talking about Horizon Chase 2, the sequel to one of my favorite arcade racers of all time, Horizon Chase. And this game just released on PC and also Nintendo Switch. Unfortunately on PC, it's only available on Epic. Horizon Chase 2 has been on Apple devices for quite some time, but it's nice to see this game make its leap over to PC and Nintendo Switch, and I'm hoping it's going to eventually make its way over to Android. Next up, we're talking about Starfield, and if you're into modding Starfield, there's a brand new retexture project that has just released. It's officially the first one. At a high level here, this retexture project is meant to make things look a little bit more detailed and a lot more beautiful. Let me know your thoughts about this one in the comments below. Last up here, this is a fun one. Turtle Roe, who gives a lot of news tips to this channel, has a GitHub page where they just started listing out a whole bunch of different emulators, along with starring ones they think are the best. I'll drop a link to it in the description below and feel free to check it out. This list is ever growing. I mean, if we take a look at PS4 emulation, I don't see RPCSX there yet. But at the same time here, again, this list is continually growing and it may be worth checking out. But anyways, that is all I've got for you in this one. Straight to the point, all stuff and no fluff. We talked about a bunch today. Let me know your thoughts about absolutely any of it in the comments below. If you liked this video, leave a like. If you didn't like this video, leave a like. Hit that subscribe button, check out my other videos. Don't tempt fate, save your state.